Okay, behind me you see my dad's old 54 XK-120 Jag. What I'm working on today is trying to devise a way to flush out the engine block and cylinder head. The radiator is out already and it's over there on the table, and it's already gotten a clean bill of health with both pressure and flow testing. So today I'm going to work with some hardware I bought at Lowe's, trying to figure out a way to adapt all this hardware that I've got here. And all this stuff is basically just PVC tubing and a small transfer pump here. And what I need to do is adapt all this hardware to these parts over here. Right in here, right there is where the water comes out of the intake manifold. Down below here, right here, is where water goes into the water pump, and I need to adapt all that hardware to those things and into this bucket, which will be my reservoir for pumping water through the system and then back out into the bucket through a filter of sorts, which will probably wind up being a pair of pantyhose cut off, and see what kind of sludge comes out of the engine. The car has had a bit of an overheating problem, so with the radiator out and the ability to flush this cooling system, flush the engine block, I'm hoping that that cooling problem will go away when I start driving the car again later this spring. Getting back to the hardware that I bought at Lowe's, you'll notice that there are two different long pipes there. One is 1.5 inches and the other is 1.25 inches, and that's because the size of the hoses at the top and bottom of the radiator, where I pointed to the intake manifold and the water pump before, are different sizes. So I need to adapt the flushing system to those individual hoses using these different pipes. The hardware here will all be used to create various bends I need in the system, and also to adapt an adapter here, which will go in like this and then onto the end of the pipe, and give me a method here of threading in the hose, which I'll use here with just standard garden hose connectors. Okay, I've got some hoses in place here. At the top of the engine, right here, I have this hose connected to the intake manifold, and I didn't really tighten this overly tight because the system will not be under pressure like when the car is running. So it's really just kind of in place there, so I can connect those PVC pipes to go down to my bucket, which will be my reservoir. And down below here, a little bit on the dark side, but down below is the hose coming off the water pump. Now that extends down pretty low, almost to the frame level, so that's going to be a little tricky. I may have to kind of bend this a bit to get my PVC pipe up over this steering piece right here and then out into the bucket. So I'm going to start cutting some tubing, some PVC pipe, and see if I can't get all this adapted to go into the reservoir so I can start flushing this block out. Okay, it's not the straightest cut around, as you can see, but this is going to go right into the hose here and direct water out into my reservoir bucket. Okay, this is where I'm at so far. I have this end inserted into where the water comes out of the intake manifold, running through this pipe here, and will drain down into the bucket, which is my reservoir. This end is not glued yet. I'm about to do that next. And slight design change as I'm looking at things here, because this space down here is so tight, where this hose is coming off the bottom of the, or coming into or out of, depending on the direction of flow of the water pump, I'm probably just going to run a PVC pipe straight down towards the floor and then run a piece of hose under the car and back up and into the drain back into the reservoir. So we'll see how all that works out.
Okay, after lots of construction, I have most of the pieces parts assembled. Down here, I have this small piece, which will allow me to connect the hose to the upper part, where the hose goes into the intake manifold. This part here will go to the lower hose that goes into the water pump, and this will slide on, allowing me to connect the hose here so I can flush both directions, going into the water pump and out the intake manifold, as well as pump into the intake manifold and flush out of the water pump. And I can also block off using this small plug either one of these, which will allow me to then pump water into the bypass hose, which this is a block off for the bypass hose, so I can go in and out of the big ones. But when I want to flush into the small bypass hose, which goes back to the heater core, and I'll show you that in a minute, then I can hook the hose up where this is, drain out of one of these, and block off the other with this plug. So this piece here goes right over here where the bypass hose normally connects. And that bypass hose allows water to bypass the radiator when the car is cold and keep flowing through the block till it warms up. And then the thermostat opens, allowing the water to flow through the radiator. And the thermostat for this car blocks off this hose here, so no, or at least very little, water will continue to flow through that hose. So that's where we are right now, and I'll put some of the, I'll attach this and then give you one more view, and I'll attach the hose also, give you one more view of how the whole system will look, and then we'll connect the pump right here. But I'm not going to run any water through till tomorrow or later in the week, because all the cement for these PVC pipes needs time to set up. So stand by and I'll show you the final configuration. Okay, here we are with the whole configuration complete, and as you can see down here, we have this pump which will draw water out of the bucket right there. It'll pump through this hose, through the pump, into this hose, which goes up into that connecting pipe coming off the, or going into the water pump. You can see down there the white pipe going into the water pump. It'll pump through the engine block, and then it'll come back out through the intake manifold right there, and then follow this pipe and drain right back down into the bucket again. And I'll have a filtration on the end of the hose, or end of this pipe here, so as it drains into the bucket, it will filter out any junk coming out of the engine. And when that's done, I will reverse it and take this hose here and connect it to the bottom of this pipe, so it'll pump up into the intake manifold this way, and then it will drain back out through the bottom of the water pump, the white pipe right down there, and this hose here, instead of going to the pump, will just drain into the bucket here and refill my reservoir. So that's the theory. When all the cement for this PVC pipe is set up and I have a little more courage, we'll give it a shot and see what happens. Okay, we're back again, and it's been a couple weeks. I made a couple changes. My friend Matt is here. Say hi, Matt.
Hello, Matt.
And the big change that I made is really in the inlet and outlet down at the bottom here. I just extended it forward to make it easier to connect the hose to, instead of the way I had it before, which was trying to shoot it straight up into that lower radiator pipe there. So we're going to give this a try, and if it all works, we'll come back and show you how it works. Just had a successful test, and as you can see down here, we have our pump on the floor. The lighting's not real good. The pump is sucking the water out of the bucket, so it's
drawing through this hose, pumping into there, all the way through the engine, and then draining out this pipe here with an old pantyhose stocking filtering. So go ahead, Matt, and plug it in. And there we go. We have a successful pumping of water with very little leakage up in the engine, just a tiny bit, but nothing to lose sleep over. So there's our successful test. And if you want to unplug that, Matt, we'll see that we did get just a little bit of sediment trapped in the stockings here. Not very much, but a little bit. So now we're going to reverse this and pump in this way and out that way and see what happens then. Okay. This is the stuff that came out of the stocking. Not much, probably not enough to cause my overheating problem, but still kind of nasty looking. That's going to make everybody dizzy. So we'll see what comes out if we do it the reverse way. Okay, so we have reverse direction here. So now we have the water pumping up through this pipe and into the top of the engine and draining out through the bottom of the engine here. And looking into the bucket, we can see that there's a little bit of discoloration. There's not much more debris. The discoloration is probably just the remnants of the coolant that was in the block and the heater core. We did open the heater core valve, which is way back here at the back side of the engine. So we've opened that valve and ran the pump both directions, in through the top of the engine, out the bottom, as well as in through the bottom of the engine and out the top. So I think we've pumped water through this engine just about every which way we can, and we've gotten what little debris there is to get out, and I think we're going to call this project done.